What if there were a town so far from everything that you cannot fly there, you cannot just show up, and you cannot easily leave? A place ringed by cliffs, hammered by wind, and guarded by an ocean where the weather decides who comes and goes. And most days, it says no. This is Edinburgh of the Seven Seas, on Tristan da Cunha, the most isolated permanent settlement on Earth. Why do people still live here? And why does the island keep everyone else out? Spin the globe south until there is almost nothing but water. That lone cone in the South Atlantic? That is Tristan da Cunha. The nearest neighbors are not near. St. Helena sits roughly 2,430 kilometers to the north. Cape Town is more than 2,800 kilometers to the east. The coast of South America lies more than 3,300 kilometers to the west. Those are not trivia lines, they are walls. There is no airport, no runway carved into rock. Everything arrives by ship from Cape Town: mail, medicine, parts, people, and only a handful of voyages each year make it through. When the seas are kind, the crossing takes about a week. When the seas are not, you wait. Here, the Roaring Forties are not a poem, they are the boss. Look at the island itself, and you see why people cluster in one place. Sheer cliffs, some higher than 600 meters, drop straight into the Atlantic. Only one small terrace on the northwest, the settlement plain, lies flat enough for homes, the school, the island store, the Albatross bar, and a slipway for longboats. Everything else is weather and stone. Tristan is the top of a shield volcano that rises from the deep ocean floor. Queen Mary's Peak climbs just over 2,060 meters and makes its own sky. Clouds stick to it. Wind tumbles down it. Sun can flip to rain in minutes. Life moves on that rhythm. Launch days for fishing, planting days for the potato patches, clinic days when seas are too rough to work. The ocean is both jailer and lifeline. Cold, rich water feeds the one industry that pays for what the island cannot make: Tristan rock-lobster. Boats head out when the wind allows, catch under tight rules, and send the crates onto the same ships that bring fuel and medicine in. Outward, the lonely island is really an archipelago. Nightingale Island for seasonal trips and seabirds. Inaccessible Island, a cliff-walled fortress almost impossible to land on. And far to the south, Gough Island, where a small team keeps a weather station running in near Antarctic storms. The world beyond feels close on a map and very far at sea. Sail the timeline back. A Portuguese captain, Tristan da Cunha, sighted the island in the early 1500s and kept going. For centuries, ships marked it and moved on. The first serious settler, an American named Jonathan Lambert, claimed it in the 1810s and soon drowned. The place did not care for declarations. In 1816, the British annexed the islands to block any rescue of Napoleon from St. Helena. When the garrison left a year later, a Scottish corporal named William Glass asked to stay with his family. A few shipwrecked sailors and whalers followed. English, Italian, Dutch, American, and a tiny community took root on the settlement plain. Work was shared. Rules were simple. Over time, 7 surnames define the place: Glass, Green, Hagen, Lavarello, Repetto, Rogers, and Swain. In a storm, everyone is family is not a slogan, it is logistics. Then the island reminded them who was in charge. In October of 1961, the ground split near the potato fields. Ash fell. A cone rose. Lava pushed toward the factory. Every resident evacuated, first to a nearby island, then to Cape Town, then all the way to Britain. People assumed it was over. They had supermarkets now, wages, traffic lights, city life, so why go back? Because home is not always the easiest place, it is the truest. In 1963, the islanders voted to return. They rebuilt Edinburgh of the Seven Seas, in the same wind, under the same volcano, on the same strip of land. They chose distance, and each other. Look just beyond the settlement, and the map widens into a guard ring of rock. Inaccessible Island sits to the west like a fortress. Sheer cliffs, no safe harbor, a coastline that turns back boats and storms alike. That wall of stone protected something fragile, a tiny rail that cannot fly, plants that grow nowhere else, and a landscape kept intact because people could not get in. The name is not poetic, it is a warning. Nightingale Island is smaller, greener, and alive with sound. Millions of seabirds crowd the air and the ground. Islanders still run longboats here in good weather for seasonal gathering. It looks gentle until it doesn't. When a freighter broke up near its shore in 2011, oil washed across the rookeries. Penguins staggered, blackened onto the rocks. One ship, one mistake, the whole chain felt it. Farther south lies Gough Island, a cold crown of cliffs in the path of the roaring 40s. A handful of people run a weather station there, charting systems that slam the South Atlantic. Gough is harsh, protected, and necessary. It warns Tristan what the ocean is planning next. These outliers are not side notes. They are the buffer that keeps the lobster fishery alive, the bird life dense, the coastline clean, and the settlement supplied with warnings before the weather turns. On this map, survival is not just a village, it is an archipelago. Here's the part most people do not expect. You cannot just move to Tristan. There is no open immigration, no apply and wait list. The right to live in Edinburgh of the Seven Seas is held by those born here. A few essential workers, teachers, doctors, engineers come on fixed-term contracts. Marrying an islander can open a door, but even then the island council decides. The rule is blunt because the island is small. Housing is limited, food is planned, medical care is finite, and a single invasive pest hitchhiking ashore could ruin crops at the patches for years. Biosecurity is strict. Every crate, every box, every boot gets checked. New pets are not adopted, they are approved. The harbor, Calshot, admits you only if the swell allows, and the paperwork is clean. It is not about keeping people out for pride, it is about keeping a fragile system alive. Outsiders here closed and think unfriendly. Islanders here closed and think survival. On a rock this remote, the social fabric is a resource like fresh water or diesel. You budget it. You protect it. Today, the village holds roughly 240 people. There is St. Mary's School, where every child learns under one roof. There is a small clinic. There is one bar, the Albatross Bar, inside Prince Philip Hall, where weddings, meetings, and a week's worth of news all spill into the same room. The harbor, Calshot Harbor, is a slipway facing wild seas. Big ships anchor offshore, and everything comes in by boat. Cash comes from the water. Fishermen land Tristan rock-lobster. The factory boxes it for export. The rest is self-reliance. Families tend their plots at the patches. They keep cattle and sheep. On most days, you fix your own roof, mend your own nets, and help your neighbor before they ask. Connection to the outside world is by sea only. There are no airports and no runways. A handful of regular ships, MFV Edinburgh, MV Lance, and SA Agulhas II, make about 10 returns from Cape Town in a typical year, plus the odd cruise call if weather allows. When the timetable slips, the shelves wait. On Tristan, the calendar is written by wind, swell, and hulls on the horizon. Safety feels different here. Doors do not need locks. Kids roam from the schoolyard to the shore under 100 watchful aunties and uncles. It is not perfect, no place is. But the sense of belonging is stronger than convenience, and that is the trade people choose. It is not stubbornness, it is an anchor. People stay for what the mainland cannot sell, to be fully known on the settlement plain. Every path has a story, and every face is a witness. You are not one more stranger in a crowd. You are someone whose footsteps are recognized by sound. They stay for the rhythm. Dawn breaks. Longboats edge through the surf. Ovens warm. Tools pass hand to hand. Work is shared without speeches. When something breaks, nobody waits for a service ticket. Someone arrives with a wrench and a spare. They stay for the quiet, not silence. Quiet, the kind that lets wind, waves, and birds share the same sentence. Nights are black enough to feel the shape of the mountain. Mornings are clean enough to hear laughter carry from one garden to the next. They stay for safety that is not advertised but lived. Children roam between doorways. Elders sit and wave and everyone else takes the hint. Slow down. In a world that runs hot, this place moves at human speed. And they stay because meaning here is visible. You can point to the roof you raised, the boat you launched, the fence you set, the grave you visit. Life is small on a map and huge in the heart. That is the answer under the facts. Not escapism, but belonging. Belonging is powerful, but belonging has a number. On Tristan da Cunha, every goodbye matters. A student flies to Cape Town for school or surgery, and sometimes does not come back. A young couple tries life in the United Kingdom, and the return ticket stays unused. Headcounts shrink one decision at a time. The village still wakes to the same wind off Queen Mary's Peak, but classrooms grow quieter, and teams on the longboats grow older. The economy stands on one narrow pier. Rock-lobster pays for fuel, medicine, parts, and the store's shelves. A bad season, a damaged factory line, a storm that cancels sailings from Cape Town, and the math hurts. The sea gives, and the sea withholds. Everyone feels it at once. Nature never promised patience. The volcano that forced the evacuation in the 1960s still crowns the island. Atlantic storms hit harder some years. Slopes move. Cliffs fall. The weather writes the calendar and the harbor decides what urgent means. There is no airport. There is only time and tide. Growth is not an option. Protection is the rule. Residency stays closed because the island is small, the soil is thin, and the culture is fragile. That keeps the fabric intact, but it also tightens the knot. Fewer families mean fewer hands for harvest, fewer crews for rescue, fewer voices in the council. Resilience has a headcount. So the question becomes simple and heavy. How long can a community this small carry a world this big on its shoulders? And what will they choose when the next hard decision arrives? Pull the globe wide and the South Atlantic looks like empty blue. Then a single speck comes into focus. A village under a volcano. A jetty facing long water. Tristan da Cunha is not a curiosity. It is a statement. The map says this. Distance can be a shield, but it is also a price. Safety without sirens. Family without locks. Work that feeds your neighbor as much as your own house. In return, there is weather that decides. A ship that may not come. A school that loses a graduate and sometimes loses a future. The world runs on speed, choice, and constant noise. Tristan runs on trust, patience, and shared work. One path gives you everything at once and keeps you hungry. The other gives you enough, slowly, and asks you to carry the rest together. So why do people still live here? Because belonging is worth the distance. Because identity can be stronger than convenience. Because some communities would rather be small and whole than large and hollow. Hold that thought as we land the plane. Next, we close with the choice Tristan makes every time the sea is rough and the lights still come on. Let the map pull back until the island is only a pinprick and the ocean is everything. On that pinprick, a school bell rings, a radio crackles from the fisheries office, and the wind coming off Queen Mary's Peak shakes the roofs in Edinburgh of the Seven Seas. This place survives on a promise older than cables and carriers. If we work together, we have enough. Tristan da Cunha answered the question in 1963 when its people left and then chose to return. They did not come back for convenience. They came back for belonging. For a village where doors do not lock, where potato patches are shared, where a ship's horn is the loudest news of the month, they stay because identity here is not a slogan. It is a daily chore list with your neighbor's name on it. Why do people still live in the most isolated town on Earth? Because distance can protect what matters, until the supply ship, the weather, or luck says otherwise. Because safety, kinship, and quiet are worth a week of rough water. Because some lives are measured not in options but in trust. If this changed how you see that tiny dot in the South Atlantic, tap like, subscribe, and share this with someone who thinks remote is a bad signal, not a way of living. And tell us in the comments, if you were given the choice, speed and noise, or slow and whole, which map would you choose?